Toronto Blue Jays bench coach Don Mattingly had some pretty shocking things to say, and all in all, it had the fan base up in arms. So we're going to break that down on this episode of Jays Digest, as well as Davis Schneider and Ricky Tiedemann, a couple of very promising prospects. One made his major league debut, another one starred in A-ball. So we'll break that down and much more coming up next. What's up, Jays fans? I'm your host, Peter Vryonis, alongside host Nick Gosse. And if you didn't hear the Don Mattingly quote from the other day, it was pretty shocking and it was pretty disappointing as well. And it's safe to say that the Blue Jays took that and ran with it, because they went out yesterday and did the exact opposite of what Don Mattingly was telling them to do. And it was so nice to see, Nick. The Jays hit 5 home runs yesterday, went 0 for 7 with runners in scoring position, but home runs cure everything.
Yeah, and there's a huge win yesterday for the Blue Jays in the series opener against Boston. But make sure to hit the subscribe button before we get into it. The support's been unbelievable. And let's just get into it. And it was, Jays coach Don Mattingly makes a shocking comment. And, the comment didn't really, age well if you're the Toronto Blue Jays, but in a good way. As they went out yesterday, hit 5 home runs. They absolutely dominated. And Davis Schneider, like you said, who we'll get into in a little bit, was really good there. So this was the quote from Don Mattingly, and it was on an Athletic article. It said, "I've heard a lot of stuff, and one thing I haven't liked all year is everyone saying, oh, they're not doing what they're supposed to do. They're not living up to what they are on paper. Sometimes you're like, this is who we are. This is how we have to win. We got to be able to have a chip and runs here and there. I don't look at us as a club that's going to go out there and have 6, 7, 8 guys that hit 30 homers. That's just not how we're built." Now, Peter, that end of the quote is kind of what got people up in arms, considering that that's exactly the type of team that, in theory and on paper, we are built to do, with Dalton Varsho capable of hitting 25-30, Matt Chapman capable of hitting 25-30, Springer, Bo, Vladdy, you can go on. What are your thoughts on the quote before we get into some other stuff here?
There's a lot of very good hitters on this team, and I wouldn't say they're pure power hitters. What's made them so successful is their approach at the plate, Nick. And Vladimir Guerrero Jr. had 48 home runs in one season. I don't know if he'll ever replicate that, but he's just a very good hitter with usually a very good approach. And for whatever reason, a lot of those guys that we just named haven't been having the best of seasons thus far. And I said this to you off camera. We said this off the record, Nick. I said Don Mattingly might be the problem here. He might be the reason as to why the approach has differed. He was never a power guy in his career. He was always gap to gap, take it the other way, make the right decisions up at the bat. He was never an all-out power hitter. That's why he hit 300 so many times. But not everyone can do that. You can't take a guy like Dalton Varsho, who's a dead pull hitter, who has so much power, but whiffs a lot, and make him a 300 hitter. It's just never going to happen. That's not the type of player that he is. So Guillermo Martinez was there in 2021 when they had those unreal offensive numbers with a 200-plus run differential. It's not the case this year, but Guillermo Martinez is still there. Don Mattingly is the only change in that coaching staff. So don't look too far down the bench to find in my mind, the real problem on this team.
Yeah, and who knows how much of it is coach problem versus a lot of it's the hitters obviously not performing as well. But it's a very interesting point you make there. And they went out yesterday, and Davis Schneider had his first MLB home run. Go check it out on Twitter if you want to see the full clip. An absolute moonshot and a hanging off-speed pitch by James Paxton, and it was one that probably my most excited, moment of the season, at least, maybe, all season, but at least very, very as of late. And it was just so fun to watch that first inning. We had home runs from Whit Merrifield. Vladdy got back on the board, and it just made me smile so much. He got another hit later in the game on a, infield single. And Peter, I'll let you touch on this screenshot a little bit here. And basically just goes to show, you can look, it's in pretty small, text there, but Matt Chapman had a home run today. Merrifield had a home run today. Vladdy had a home run today. Schneider had a home run today. We did what we kind of expected our team to do coming into the year, which is hit for base hits when you have to, but also hit for power when it's, available. Obviously, Whit Merrifield's been on a bit of a heater this season, but the guys I just mentioned, aside from David Schneider, who never played an MLB game, are kind of guys who, hit for power. Matt Chapman and Vladdy should be hitting 30 home runs at the very minimum each this year. So,
yeah.
Mattingly was a bit of a unfortunate, quote there, especially that last sentence. Everything else, is fine, but that last sentence got me a little bit confused and mildly concerned, even though I don't think it has a huge actual impact on the Blue Jays this year, but maybe it does. Who actually knows?
I was all in on the Don Mattingly hire before the season started, and now I feel like he has way too much influence on this team. He's a legend of the game. Let's take nothing away from what he accomplished as a player, but when you look at his managerial record, it's not great, Nick. And he managed to do absolutely nothing with the LA Dodgers. He didn't win a single thing over there. Then when he went to the Marlins, he got exposed. He didn't have a great team, and he wasn't able to string wins together. So this team, especially once you get to the playoffs, you're going to face elite pitching day in, day out, and it's hard to string hits against those top tier pitchers in the game. So you got to be able to hit home runs when your pitch comes. You can't be missing those middle pitches like the Blue Jays have been doing all season long. And yesterday was a great example of what they're going to have to do if they want to win any games come playoff time. They got to piggyback off their very strong pitching because that is the strength of this team. And then they got to find ways to scratch a few runs together. And they had a few hits, but it's not like they were driving guys in with runners in scoring position. They were just hitting a ton of solo home runs, 5 solo home runs, and they only had 7 runs in the game. So I was all for the approach yesterday. I love seeing this team hit home runs, and they have the ability to go ahead and do that as well.
Yeah, all pulled, as our majority of their home runs were pulled there. So I know a
Yeah.
lot of Guillermo Martinez fans out there will laugh at that. But let us know in the comments what your thoughts are on all that, and let's get into the Ricky Tiedemann dominant start there, and I guess debut in a way in A ball as he was rehabbing from his not major, but fairly major injury at this point. Ricky Tiedemann was absolutely dominant. He went 3 innings pitched, 0 runs, 1 hit, 0 walks, and the big number here is 9 strikeouts. Struck out 9 batters in 3 innings pitched, averaging 96.4 miles per hour and touched 98 as a left-handed starter, in case you're unfamiliar with him. And Peter, I don't even know what to say. Of course, it's A ball. It's, a level that he should dominate at, but he did more than dominate. He showed that he needs to get, and he'll get back to Double A, I'd say, very, very soon. And I don't know. I mean, he's a guy that I don't think they're going to call him up this year because of the injuries and because of the lack of innings, but maybe as early as next year. He needs to get his innings workload up. That's the bottom line here. But he's the best prospect that the Jays have had in a few years here.
Yeah, definitely. You could argue that he has the best stuff not only in the minor leagues, but in the Blue Jays organization. He's up there with Kevin Gausman when it just comes to pure stuff. His fastball is electric, his changeup's very good, and his secondary pitches are good too. And he's not one of those prospects that struggles with control, as evident in that line that you just showed there, Nick. He knows where his pitches are going. He knows how to locate in that strike zone, and he's so poised out there on that mound. Obviously, we've had him surface multiple times in trade talks, like when it comes to acquiring superstar players, but I think he's well on his way to superstardom, and the Jays would be very lucky to have a guy like him for a long time. I think he's just maybe a year or a year and a half away from the major leagues here, and he's going to have a huge impact with the big league ball club. He's that good.
Yeah, and his innings, again, like I just mentioned, are the biggest stopping factor, and the goal was to get him, worked up throughout this year and maybe call him up for September in the bullpen. I know we spoke about that a lot in the offseason in December and January about having him in the bullpen, but the injury set him back. But looking at this, and Thomas Hall, the Blue Jays writer, shout out to him. He said Ricky Tiedemann faced 10 batters, generated 9 whiffs on 32, or 9 with 14 whiffs on 32 swings. His fastball is dominant. He had 9 whiffs just off his four-seam fastball, which is something that is just an unbelievable stat when you really think about it. His sweeper's unbelievable. His changeup is, graded 70 out of 80, a plus changeup, and it's just wild.
Yeah, absolutely. And I look at Eury Perez of the Miami Marlins as a perfect example as to how the Blue Jays might deploy Ricky Tiedemann for next year. Perez on the Marlins, he's on an innings limit. He's been phenomenal when he's been up there, but they don't typically let him go longer than 5 or 6 innings in a start. They're really trying to limit his innings, the amount of pitches that he throws, because he's only 20 years old, just like Ricky Tiedemann. And they actually sent him back down to the minors. And now the Marlins went all in at the deadline. They're trying to make a push for the playoffs. They're going to call him back up, whether it's in the bullpen, whether it's in the starting rotation, but they're giving him a chance. And that's what I want to see the Jays do with Ricky Tiedemann next year. Limit his innings. Don't overexert him either. But let him pitch for your ball club, because he could definitely help a lot more than some guys that are on the 40-man roster and a lot of guys that are on the 26-man roster as well.
Yeah, it's actually a very, very good point. Yeah, they're, a lot of Marlins fans are upset that they called him down. Obviously, his ERA is dominant. We saw him play and start against the Blue Jays. He has dominant stuff. And
Right.
like Ricky Tiedemann here, 9 whiffs, forcing fastball. He's a very, very special pitcher. And I think they're going to be very, very cautious with him and maybe not rush him like, maybe internally they think they did with Nate Pearson, which ultimately stunted his development. And of course, the injuries were a big thing there, but they don't want to have injuries happen again. But that'll wrap up the video. Exciting series, tonight resumes against the Boston Red Sox. Very, very important. I have a feeling the Jays are going to go on a bit of a run here, but hopefully that feeling comes to fruition. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
Thanks.